Operation Christmas Child shoe boxes are due today. Hope you all brought those in. If you don't have them with you now, well, you can always bring them tomorrow. We're going to take those up and put those with all the rest. If you want to know what happens to those shoe boxes after they leave us, there's a little color poster kind of thing back at one of the tables back there that you can pick up. It'll show you where those boxes travel after they leave here and before they get to their destination. All right. Secondly, church-wide family Thanksgiving dinner next Sunday, 5:30 p.m. right here. And if you've not signed up to bring something, you can do that out there. Yes, Miss Lauren, who does a lot of our admin stuff, she has graciously provided us with a visual illustration. If you signed up to bring something, this is the size of something, whatever it is, that you need to bring. So I'm looking forward to that. And just know that we're going to do more than eat. We, of all people as Christians, should be the most thankful people on the planet. Okay? So we're going to gather in this room. We are going to eat, but we're going to sing. We're going to worship the Lord together. I'm going to share a 10-minute kind of meditation on giving thanks as the people of God. And then we're going to give you an opportunity to testify about the Lord's goodness in your life. And then we're going to share the Lord's Supper together. So it's going to be a good evening, a good time together of testifying together and encouraging one another about the Lord's thankfulness. The Lackland Life Group, which usually meets on Sunday afternoons at 4, correct? Will not be meeting today. So if that involves you or if you were thinking about visiting, please make note of that. On Friday, November 30th, there will be a youth camp fundraiser. It is that time as our students kind of ramp into raising money for camp. That's going to be a date night here at the church, $25 per couple. You can sign up for the Thanksgiving dinner and for date night out there, as well as to get one of these Christmas devotionals. In the month of December, we're going to be preaching through and working through a series called Come Let Us Adore Him. And I want us not only to do that on Sundays, but to do that in our homes and with our families. And this companion devotional will really kind of help set the tone in your home as we walk toward Christmas together. So you can sign up out there for one. Next Sunday will be the last Sunday to do that. You can pay $10. They're $10 each, and we will have them here on the 25th. And then Christmas Gift Factory for all of our kiddos is coming up on Sunday, December 16th. From what I understand, that's always a fun time for the kids. So parents, please make note of that. That'll give you an afternoon as parents perhaps to go do some shopping. All right, well, it is Veterans Day. And I don't want to fail to acknowledge all of those here who have served in any of the branches of our armed forces. So if that's you, would you please stand up? If you've served, all right, I want to invite up the men to take our offering at this time. If you guys will come forward, we'll pray over that. And then we'll dive into God's Word together. Father, we're so grateful today that you would redeem us from the curse of sin, that you would make us members of your own family, and that today you would give us the opportunity to gather here in this place, to give thanks to you, to worship you, praise your name, and to sit under the reading and preaching of your Word. God, I pray that it would not pass us by how much you have given us and how much what we owe to you. Lord, may our offering this morning reflect our hearts of gratitude and thanksgiving. And God, even as we give, may it reflect an open-heartedness and an eagerness as we prepare to sit under the preaching of your word. God, be with me, anoint me, lead me, guide me. God, that your people may be fed this morning. We ask your blessing upon the rest of our time of worship. In Jesus' name. Amen. All right, now take up our offering. If you've got your Bible, go ahead and turn to Ruth chapter 3. I hope you all are enjoying our journey through Ruth as much as I am. I have the wonderful privilege of studying and preparing to put this in front of you every week. And y'all, I'm telling you, it's a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun. And I get a lot of joy out of, in a real sense, being in the kitchen, right? Like, that's how I envision it. I'm in the kitchen, I'm preparing the meal, the feast. And my prayer is that as I put it before you on Sundays, that's exactly what it is. A feast upon God and upon Christ, an opportunity for you to sit under the preaching of the Word and leave here nourished. That's my goal. That's our goal, I hope. So Ruth chapter 3 this morning, real quick, I want to catch you up. Ruth chapter 1, we met Naomi, this destitute widow who is left without husband, without sons, and only 2 daughters-in-law who can do nothing for her. She makes her way back to the land of Judah and to Bethlehem because she heard that the Lord had provided food. That's why she went back. Ruth chapter 2, we come across this chance meeting between Ruth, her daughter-in-law, and Boaz, this man who's going to become even more important in the story today. And at the end of chapter 2, though this thing has built and built and built, and we're waiting for what's going to happen between Ruth and for Boaz, and the end of chapter 2 just kind of leaves us, because it tells us that at the end of the barley harvest, Ruth lived with her mother. And we should be asking, well, okay, what's next? Tell us what comes next. And I hope you're eager to find out this morning as we dive back into what is just an amazing, amazing story of God's love and His faithfulness and His sovereignty in all of the ordinary events of life. So Ruth chapter 3, beginning in verse 1. Take note of this. Remember, Naomi is the main character. Okay? The main human character. Anyway. She has the first word in chapter 1, chapter 3, and she has the last word in chapter 3. Really, really important. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Now, again, we don't know how much time has passed between the end of the barley harvest and this point at which Naomi, the mother-in-law, said, Sweet daughter-in-law, should I not seek for you rest? Now, that harkens back to a prayer she had prayed for her daughter-in-law in chapter 1. Look back at verse 9 of chapter 1. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. Now, we've seen Naomi come a long way in the 2 chapters that we have studied. We've seen her move from bitterness back to faith and to joy. Here we see her move from being really grieved to the point of not caring about anyone else, to the point now at the beginning of chapter 3 where hope has been restored in her life, where joy has been restored in her life, where a desire to care not just for herself, but for her daughter-in-law has been restored in her life. The best way to say it would be she is right here at the beginning of chapter 3 becoming the answer to her own prayer that she had prayed all the way back in chapter 1. Hope has been rekindled, and Naomi begins to dream about a future for her daughter-in-law. Now, what explains the transformation? What explains the uptick of activity in Naomi's life? Why now? Well, it could be that she's just a meddling mother-in-law. Anybody know about meddling mother-in-laws? You don't have to raise your hand. No hands. You don't have to raise your hand. But it could be that she got the sense that Boaz wasn't going to do nothing. And so she said, this guy's clueless. more likely scenario, that she got a real sense that God might be providing more for her daughter-in-law than just food. In fact, look back at chapter 2. Chapter 2, verse 20. This is after Ruth has come home from her first interaction with Boaz, and Naomi responds to the meeting with Boaz. She says, Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness is not forsaken the living and the dead." Naomi also said to her, "The man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers." So when you go back to verse 3 and you see why she decides to take action, verse 2 says, "Is not Boaz our relative, with whose young women you work?" Here's what's going on, brothers and sisters. Naomi wanted good for her daughter-in-law. She had come back to life through God's provision of grain and through these chance meetings that Ruth and Boaz had with one another. And she senses that God is at work for her daughter-in-law's good, so she acts. And she acted specifically because Boaz was a relative of her dead husband, and in particular, something called a kinsman redeemer. And Naomi got the sense that God might have more planned for Ruth than just a chance meeting. So she devised a bold plan, and we're going to see it in just a minute, a risky plan that she believed might move her and her daughter-in-law's story forward. Now, why? And I told you last week that we would really get into this week. And I want to kind of set the stage for why this whole notion of kinsman redeemer is really important. The kinsman redeemer, this idea of this relative who could help redeem or save or restore this family, was considered in ancient Israel a protector of the family. All right? It fell to the kinsman redeemer as a member of the extended family to, in some cases, in many cases, rescue that family from permanent, catastrophic kinds of losses in a fallen world. Now, if you want to read more about it, you can read all about the kinsman redeemer in Leviticus chapter 25. All right? But here's the deal. God had given a parcel, a tract of the promised land to every single family, in every single clan, in every single tribe in the land of Israel. And that promised land was to remain in that family in perpetuity. As long as the people of Israel remained in the land that God had given them, each family was to possess their piece of land as evidence of God's tangible blessing, not just in general to the people, but to every member of the covenant family. And there were occasions when that parcel of land was in danger of being lost. Let's say a family began to experience real financial hardship. Okay? They might have to sell their piece of land in order to stay afloat. All right? They might experience something like an inability to keep that piece of land in the family into the foreseeable future. Let's say, like a widow, like Naomi, didn't have an heir, a male heir that she could pass the land to, then the land might fall out of their family's possession. Now, there were things in God's economy designed to make sure that didn't happen forever. Have you ever heard of the year of Jubilee? Those land possessions were to return to their given family after a period of 50 years. But there was also a provision called a kinsman redeemer in God's economy, where this particular man, as a member of the extended family, could buy the land that a family member had to sell and give it back to them. A kinsman redeemer could also marry the dead husband's widow, produce an heir by her, and that heir would be the dead husband's son and would inherit his portion of the promised land. So everything is behind all of that. All of that is in Naomi's head when she realizes who Ruth had been meeting with and what God might be putting together here through Ruth and through Boaz. It's the very real possibility that Boaz might assume this role of kinsman redeemer. Now, it was not required, but there's hope. There is hope here that because he's a godly man, he will act. And so she devises a plan to push the story forward. All right? Listen to what she says. Verse 2. Is not Boaz our relative with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash therefore and anoint yourself and put on your cloak and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he was finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies, then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. And she replied, all that you say, I will do. Naomi, what are you doing? And if you're not thinking that when you read this, you're not reading it right. Okay? This is sketch, y'all. This is sketch. But it's also bold. It's brash. It's risky. It does show a woman who's no longer lingering in the shadows of grief and bitterness. Okay? It showcases a newfound hope in a once hopeless widow. It shows faith in God, and this is really important, faith in the character of Boaz. Because her last words to her daughter-in-law are, when you lie down, you wait, and he will tell you what to do. She's trusting the kind of man that she has experienced him to be. It shows a care and a concern for her daughter-in-law's future that hasn't been present since the beginning of the book. Now, at the same time, we've got to be real honest about this scheme. Okay? It was dangerous. It was dangerous for Ruth because threshing floors where the men would have taken pitchforks and thrown the grain up in the air to separate the chaff from the seed. Those lay outside of town. So we're talking about a journey that Ruth would have had to make on her own in disguise. Not a good idea. Somebody could have happened upon her and abducted her. Boaz could have also taken offense at her forwardness. Because if y'all don't know, this is a pretty forward thing to do. He could have said, what kind of woman are you? No! Get out of here. He could have also taken advantage of it. And he could have lied about it. And who would the townspeople have believed? Boaz or Moabite woman, Ruth? And then there's the place. There's the threshing floor. In the unsavory days of the judges, that's the right way to say this, the women of the night would have conducted their business at the threshing floors. Just read Hosea 9:1. Just read Hosea 9:1. So, a bold plan, a risky plan, a brash plan, a somewhat dangerous and sketchy plan, but a calculated plan based on the kind of person that Naomi believed Ruth to be. And the question we're left with at the end of verse 5 is, okay, is God going to bless this thing? Or is God going to say, no way, Jose, to this plan? Is God going to move the story forward through this brash widow's actions? Or is he going to put a halt to it? Verse 6. So, Ruth went down to the threshing floor, and she did as her mother-in-law had commanded her. Now, at this point, I wish I had a little bit more detail, because I'd love to know what was going on in her head. What is she asking me to do? How is this going to turn out? I have to imagine floor course, where the men are working in disguise. She has probably hidden herself behind a large pile of grain, and she just waits through the evening and into the night, all by herself. Nobody with her. She waits through the dinner time, through the merrymaking of dinner. She waits for everybody to fall asleep. And then she goes in. She uncovers Boaz's feet and just lays down and waits for something to happen. I bet her heart is doing this. Just beating out of her chest. Well, here in verse 8 is the climactic point of this entire story. All right? At midnight. Now imagine how long she's been waiting. In the middle of the night, the man was startled and turned over. So his feet had been uncovered earlier. The chill of the night begins to get to him. He awakens suddenly, notices that his feet are uncovered, but that's not all. Right? He sees a figure, a shadow at his feet. He notices it's a woman. And he says, "Who are you?" Now, I don't know what you're like when you wake, when you're startled awake in the middle of the night. But I have to imagine it's going to be something like that, right? Who are you? Is his question. Because there are no flashlights. There are no lights on phones. It's dark. And so he has to ask who it is. And listen to Ruth's response. And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." Now, Ruth follows her mother-in-law's instructions to the letter, with the exception of one. She tells her to lie down at his feet and to pray, and he will tell her what to do. She doesn't do that. Again, bold, courageous Ruth steps right up to the plate. She doesn't leave anything to chance. And she asks him, and this is what she asks him: "Will you marry me?" Pretty bold stuff. That's what she means when she says, I'm your servant. It's a different word for servant than she used back in chapter 2. It means a maiden of marriageable age. So she's telling him, I want you to spread your wings over me, to redeem me, to make me your wife. Now what's beautiful about that is, back in chapter 2, verse 12, listen to Boaz's prayer for Ruth. "The Lord repay you for what you've done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." And then in chapter 3, verse 9, Ruth says, "I'm your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." So what Ruth is doing is Ruth is recognizing now what God is up to. And Ruth is saying, Boaz, be the answer to your prayer for me and for us. And I love how Boaz responds. He's blown away. He's absolutely blown away. And he said in verse 10, and by the way, this is the longest speech in the book of Ruth. It's vitally, vitally important. He said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman." Now, when he calls her a worthy woman, two things happen. It recalls the fact in chapter 1 that Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech. So God is telling us that these two are a perfect match. a worthy man and a worthy woman. But he's also showing us something really specific about what a godly woman looks like. Did you know that the words worthy woman are the same words used to describe the woman of Proverbs 31? Proverbs 31:10 describes a woman of godliness. And did you know that before Jesus and before the New Testament was incorporated into the Bible, that the book of Ruth often followed the book of Proverbs in the Bible? Because it is a beautiful illustration of feminine godliness. And notice, feminine godliness is bold. It's courageous. It acts on faith in the Lord. Right? There's so many things we can learn about both that and being a man of God from this worthy man in the book of Ruth. So Boaz is blown away. He says, may you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You've made this last kindness, circle that word. That's the key word in the book of Ruth again, the word hesed, steadfast love. You've made this last kindness greater than the first. What does he mean? Well, her first act of kindness was leaving everything behind in Moab and committing herself lock, stock, and barrel to her mother. We remember from chapter 2 that completely blew him away. He couldn't believe she had done that. But then he says this second kindness is even greater than the first. Why? He says it. He says, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. Translation, Ruth could have had any man in the town she wanted. Any man. Poor, rich. She had an incredible reputation as a godly woman. She could have married any of them, but she chose Boaz. Why? Because her greatest concern is still her mother. She wants to produce an heir so that her dead husband's family line can continue. And again, it blows Boaz away. He can't believe the kind of love that would sacrifice a self-chosen future for investing herself in her mother-in-law's future. That's the kind of woman that Ruth is. And then Boaz says, eagerly, my daughter, do not fear. I will do all that you ask. For all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. Now, at this point, if we're reading this thing right, we're getting really excited. We're starting to hear wedding bells. We're starting to see this story just come to a wonderful, full of celebration kind of conclusion, right? Not quite yet. Because the author has one more wrench to throw in. Look at what he says. Look at what Boaz says in verse 12. And now it's true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Uh-oh. There's another guy. There's somebody else who needs to have the opportunity, according to custom, to redeem Ruth. And Boaz knows that. But look at what he does. He says, remain here tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good. Let him do it. But if he's not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until then. What an incredible man of integrity. He doesn't take advantage of her. He doesn't take advantage of a situation in which I'm willing to bet both of them were attracted to one another. He tells her to lie down. He protects her. And then in the morning, when they get up, let me back up for just a second, because I want to say this, because I think there's a real contrast here. Like, you have Naomi at the beginning of the chapter, who exhibits a brashness and a boldness. But you have Boaz here, who exhibits the kind of faith that's willing to entrust the situation to the Lord. Now, different situations call for different responses, And both of those responses can be godly responses. Acting in faith and waiting in faith. Okay? But Boaz exhibits great faith here when he says, look, there's a plan, there's a custom for how this typically plays out. And I'm going to entrust it to the Lord. Even though I love this woman and I'm more than willing to redeem her, I'm going to trust that the Lord will work all of this out. Hey, that is incredible, incredible faith. And he's willing to say, if it's not me, that's great. And it's great for Ruth. If it is me, then I'm more than committed to doing it. But notice what he does in verse 14. This further shows his integrity and his compassion. So she lay at his feet until the morning, but arose before one could recognize another. So the sun's not quite up yet. People don't know one from another as people begin to move around. And he said, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. And he said, bring the garment that you're wearing and hold it out. So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her. Then she went into the city. You see what he's doing? He's doing a couple of things. He's protecting Ruth from what could be misconstrued by people in the town. She is a worthy woman, a woman of integrity. She came to the threshing floor for noble purposes and not for wicked purposes. And so he wants to protect her as she walks back into town. So he says, take off your outer shawl and lay it down, and get this. He puts between 70 and 90 pounds of grain in it. Much more than last time, even to the point that the author tells us that Boaz had to put it on her. He had to lift it up so she could carry it. So as she's going back into town, nobody thinks ill of her. Right? Oh, she's been to collect grain. Not a problem. But there's something more important going on here. There's something more meaningful happening in this gift of grain. All right? Go back to verse 16. She went into the city, and when she came to her mother-in-law, right? Pause again. Whoo, Naomi. She's been up all night. She's been scheming, she's been planning, and she's been praying. Okay? She's been watching out the window. Just like a meddling mother-in-law, right? She set this thing into motion, and she's waiting for a daughter-in-law to come home, and she sees her. And she sees her carrying this grain toward the house. She throws open the door, and the best way to translate the question she asks is, who are you? What do you think she means by that? The question means, so are you his wife or not? Who are you? Again, let's just cut to the chase. No small talk. Again, Naomi, main character, right? Book ends with her and her last words. I can imagine Ruth coming in. She can't carry this thing any further. She drops it on the floor. Grain spills everywhere, all over the floor. Forget the fact that it's got to be cleaned up. Boaz's message to Naomi harkens back to what she said about herself in chapter 1. The Lord has taken everything from me. Don't even call me Naomi anymore. Call me Mara, which means bitter, because the Lord took me away full and brought me back what? Empty. But what does Boaz say? Be sure to tell your mother. Oh, guys, that is amazing. He says, be sure to tell her. You must not go back empty-handed to your mother. Oh, guys. You know what God is saying to Naomi through this grain all over her floor? I got this. Naomi, I've got this. All your planning, all your scheming, all your staying up all night fretting, I got this. The evidence is all over your floor. And so look at how that transforms Naomi. And no, this is so amazing. Verse 8. Naomi replied, wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out. For the man will not rest, but will settle the matter tonight. Again, the Lord is, it's so amazing to me how the Lord is just at work in her. The beginning of chapter 3, this eagerness of faith and love and hope, it channels into this crazy, risky plot. And here at the end, the Lord has again spoken tenderly and mercifully to her heart with this gift of grain. And what does she say? I can imagine them embracing. I can imagine tears on their faces because they see a future now. They see God redeeming. They see God planning and doing all these different things. And she pulls back her daughter-in-law and she looks her in the face. Tears are streaming down both of their faces. And she says to her, wait. The man is committed to this. And behind that is her commitment, her trust in the Lord. What an amazing journey that the Lord has Naomi on. Boaz, through this gift of grain, brings deep assurance to these women. Again, through his generosity. And perhaps especially to Naomi. And brothers and sisters, here's what you need to see. Boaz imitates the character of the God who comes to his people with armloads of mercy. I love Psalm 130, verses 7 and 8. O Israel, hope in the Lord, for with the Lord there is, and here's our word, steadfast love. And with him is plentiful redemption. Wow, what a phrase. Plentiful redemption. And he will redeem Israel from all his iniquities. So here we are. At the end of Ruth chapter, where Ruth, with her mother-in-law, hears the final words of Ruth in the story. Where Ruth hears from Naomi, wait. Wait. And that's where we're left. To see exactly how the Lord turns this out. Redemption is coming. Who will it be? We still don't know. But God continues to be at work. So what are we left with? What are the things I want you to grab hold of this morning as we prepare to respond in worship and leave this place? Number one, it's this. God uses normal people like meddling widows, full of faith and eager to find husbands for their daughters-in-law to accomplish his purposes. Her story is characterized by a brash, bold, risky plan. Some would even argue that it was foolish. But guess what God did? God took it, God incorporated it into his story, and that's exactly what he does with you and me. With us normal, everyday folk who make some good decisions and some bad ones, whose plans sometimes work out and whose plans sometimes terribly, disastrously fail. God takes all of those things, and for our good and for his glory, he incorporates them into his great story of redemption. Now that should do one thing and not do one thing. Number one, it should give you great comfort and encouragement. How many of you have made a bad decision? How many of you have executed a terrible plan and it didn't go the way you thought it would have or should have? Yes. Most of us. The good news is God is sovereign. And he can use all of those things and does use all of those things for his good and for his glory and for our good. Now here's the thing that should not do. Do not leave here and say, well, Mike gave me permission to go empty my savings, go to the casino this afternoon, and blow it all in some brash, bold scheme to get rich quick, right? Taking bold risks just for the sake of doing it is not always the right course of action. We desperately need wisdom from the Lord to know the right path to take. God's work in Naomi's life through her plan is a description of how God works, not a prescription, right? To give us permission to go and do things. It's designed to lead us to worship, to lead us to wonder that God would work through our feeble faith and our sometimes crazy concoctions and plans to accomplish His will. Secondly, I want you to see the heart of Christ in the heart of Boaz. The Lord Jesus, just like Boaz, has a heart full to overflowing with compassion toward all who will come to Him seeking redemption. Did you notice how eager Boaz was? Did you notice how ready, how on the edge of his seat he was to make sure that Ruth and Naomi were taken care of? Whether it was the other guy or whether it was him. John 6:37 tells us that Jesus will never cast out anyone who comes to Him. Ever. He's the kind of Savior who welcomes all who will repent and trust Him. Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30 say that Jesus will receive all those who are burdened, all those who are heavy laden, all of those who are weary. So the gospel call this morning is this. If you are weary in your sin, if you recognize that your past is a disaster, your present is pointless, and your future is empty, the good news is Jesus redeems people like you. If you've come to the end of yourself, and you are without hope, and you will but come to Him and ask for forgiveness of your sin and say, Jesus, I need you. You know what He'll do? He will eagerly receive you. We don't think of Jesus like that, but that's who He is. That's His heart for the lost and the broken. And not only that, the Lord Jesus is committed to saving everyone who comes to Him. Like Boaz, the good news is, brothers and sisters, that Jesus will not rest until redemption is settled. Until we are all, every single one of us in His family, seated around the victory table at the marriage supper of the Lamb, and we are prepared to feast with Him. When sin has been conquered, when death has been defeated, and when we're all invited into our Father's house and it's done, and Jesus says, welcome home, He will not rest. He's alive, He's well, and He is at work. He's at work in your heart, in your life, in my life. He's at work in our lives as a church family to make us more like Himself and to bring us all the way home to Him. For you see, our inheritance is not going to be a small piece of land in the Middle East. Our inheritance is God Himself. An eternal relationship with Him and everything that belongs to Jesus. Which is essentially everything. And that's the day that we wait for. And Jesus is going to complete it. He's going to bring us all the way home to Him. I think when we get there, our words, our song is going to be so much like the people who came through the Exodus. Exodus 15:13 says, you have led in your steadfast love the people whom you have redeemed. You have guided them by your strength to your holy abode. That's just amazing. Jesus is committed to taking us all the way home. And then finally, having been redeemed by Jesus Christ from our sin, and having been reconciled to God and to one another as family, we are now responsible, even as the kinsman redeemer was, to care for one another. Jesus has redeemed us from a life of emptiness and from a life of lack, because everything that belongs to him belongs to us. And whenever one member of our body, our family, is hurting, we're to all be family protectors, bearing burdens, lifting one another up, caring for and encouraging one another, even at great cost to ourselves. That's what Jesus did. It cost him everything. And as we're going to see next week, redemption would cost Boaz too. Right? And it'll be costly to us to imitate Christ. But it's my prayer that we deepen into that kind of people. Because it's that kind of people who are characterized by the cross love of Jesus that make an impact on a community. When people look in and they say, how in the world do you people love one another like that? Why would you sacrifice in such profound ways for one another? It's Jesus.